He was supposed to be here forever. She said yes. 2 weeks later he was dead, and the last person to see him alive was the man he once called his best friend. At first it looked like a robbery gone wrong, but the deeper police looked, the clearer it became. A betrayal, a trap. This was no accident. This was a setup, because hidden behind the smiles and champagne was a marriage license no one knew existed, and a promise made in secret, sealed with blood. Before we take you deeper into this twisted true crime story, I want to say thank you to you watching this right now. Thank you for being part of the Crime Vault community. It's completely free, but it means the world to us. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. That one click helps us keep uncovering the stories others are too afraid to tell. Your support makes this possible. Thank you. Now, let's go back to the beginning, where love, lies, and loyalty collided, and only one of them made it out alive. His name was Daniel Cross, 33 years old, a civil engineer by day, a hopeless romantic by nature. Friends described him as grounded, loyal, the kind of man who remembered your mother's birthday and left handwritten notes tucked under pillows. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't reckless, he was steady, the kind you build a life with. Then came Alyssa Monroe. Smart, beautiful, enigmatic. She worked part-time at a local art gallery, taught yoga on weekends, and rarely talked about her past. She moved into town 2 years before she met Daniel, or so she said. But as investigators would later learn, that timeline wasn't entirely true. To Daniel, though, she was everything. Their connection was instant, consuming. Within 5 months, they moved in together. By month 7, he bought a ring. And then there was Mark Reeves, Daniel's best friend since college. They met freshman year, bonded over football, heartbreaks, and years of growing up together. Daniel called him his brother. Mark called him family, the kind of bond that should have been unbreakable. But behind Mark's easy smile was something darker, something he never shared, not even with Daniel. As Alyssa and Daniel's relationship blossomed, Mark grew distant. He missed Daniel's birthday. He skipped the engagement party. When asked, he simply said he'd been busy, but detectives would later uncover something else entirely. Phone records, late-night calls, messages deleted, a trail of secrecy that didn't start when Daniel got engaged. It started long before. 3 lives intertwined, a love triangle set to explode. But only one of them had a plan for how it would end. It was a Friday night, November 11th, clear skies, no wind. Nothing unusual, at first. Daniel had just wrapped up a long week at work. He texted Alyssa around 6:42 p.m. "Dinner still on at 8? Can't wait to see you, babe." She replied 3 minutes later. "Running late, might be closer to 8:30. Love you, short. Simple, nothing suspicious." At 7:10 p.m., Daniel called Mark. No one knows exactly what was said during that call. It lasted just under 2 minutes, but what we do know is that it was the last phone call Daniel ever made. At 8:23 p.m., a neighbor's security camera caught Daniel pulling into his driveway, alone, wearing a dark coat, carrying what appeared to be a takeout bag. 3 minutes later, the porch light flickered once, then again, then went dark. What happened in those next 20 minutes has never been fully explained. But at 8:47 p.m., a different camera, 3 houses down, picked up a figure leaving Daniel's house on foot, hooded, head down, carrying something under their jacket. That same night, Alyssa called 911, but not until 11:19 p.m. Her voice was panicked, shaky. She told the dispatcher she'd just found her fiancé unresponsive in the living room. She said she'd only just arrived, that she'd been trying to call him for hours. When paramedics arrived, Daniel was already gone. No signs of forced entry. No struggle, just one clean stab wound to the chest, delivered with precision. On the floor, just beside his hand, was the engagement ring, still in its box, still open. There was no note, no weapon, but there was something else. A single wine glass filled halfway, and a second one shattered on the floor. What began as a quiet evening ended in a calculated murder, but the real mystery was just beginning. When detectives arrived at the scene, the house was quiet. Too quiet for a crime of passion. No signs of forced entry. No blood trail. No overturned furniture. Daniel was lying on the living room floor, his body positioned almost deliberately. No defensive wounds, no struggle, just one clean incision. Straight through the heart. It didn't feel impulsive, it felt rehearsed. Investigators immediately turned to Alyssa. Her behavior that night was erratic, but not hysterical. She cried, she shook. But her story didn't quite line up. She claimed she hadn't heard from Daniel in hours, that she arrived at 11:10 and found him already dead. But Daniel's phone showed a call from her at 7:53 p.m., a call she never mentioned. When asked about the call, Alyssa paused, then said, "I must have forgotten. I was worried. Maybe I called earlier. I don't remember." Detectives took note. That wasn't the only inconsistency. Her clothes had no blood on them, but the cuffs of her jacket were damp. And when police searched her car, they found something strange. A red hoodie, still wet, stuffed into a gym bag in the trunk. And it wasn't hers. She claimed it belonged to Daniel. But friends told detectives they'd never seen Daniel wear red. Ever. Then came the surveillance footage. A neighboring camera, across the street, angled just right, captured something that changed everything. At 8:45 p.m., just 2 minutes before the hooded figure was seen leaving Daniel's home, a car pulled into the next block, a black SUV, matching the exact make and model that Mark Reeves drove. When detectives reached out to Mark, he sounded surprised, calm, cooperative, too cooperative. He said he hadn't spoken to Daniel that night, that he'd been home alone, watching a movie. But phone records said otherwise. That 2-minute call Daniel made at 7:10 p.m., it had gone straight to Mark. And right after the call ended, Mark turned off his phone for nearly 3 hours. Investigators knew what that meant. Someone was lying. Someone was hiding something. And whoever had taken Daniel's life had left just enough behind to make both Alyssa and Mark look guilty. It wasn't just a love triangle. It was a ticking bomb. And someone had finally lit the fuse. As detectives dug deeper into Daniel's case, the picture began to change, fast. What started as a simple murder investigation was turning into something far more calculated. A subpoena into Alyssa Monroe's records revealed the first crack. She had legally changed her last name just 3 years before meeting Daniel. But before she was Alyssa Monroe, she was Alyssa Reeves. Reeves, the same last name as Mark, not a coincidence. A background check confirmed what no one had seen coming. Alyssa and Mark weren't just connected. They were once married. The marriage had ended quietly, almost secretly, 5 years ago in another state. No public record, unless you were looking for it. And clearly, Daniel never had. Detectives were stunned. Alyssa had been engaged to one man, while hiding a legal and emotional history with his best friend. But that wasn't all. The red hoodie found in Alyssa's car? It wasn't Daniel's. DNA results showed it belonged to Mark Reeves. And hidden in the front pocket was a burner phone. One that had sent just 5 text messages, all to Alyssa, in the week leading up to the murder. The final message, sent just hours before Daniel's death, read, "Don't forget what you promised, or he dies." Alyssa denied knowing anything about it, said she hadn't seen Mark in years, claimed someone must be trying to frame her. But her own phone told a different story. Deleted messages, recovered images, and one voice memo time-stamped a month before the engagement. Mark's voice, low and angry, saying, "You're playing with fire, Liz. Don't forget who helped you start this." The triangle wasn't just romantic, it was strategic. Mark had been in the picture long before Daniel ever knew Alyssa existed. And by the time Daniel proposed, he was already walking straight into a trap he couldn't see. One man in love, one woman with secrets, and one ex-husband who never really let go. This wasn't just a love triangle, it was a setup, and Daniel Cross was the sacrificial piece. By now, detectives knew this wasn't about a moment of rage. It was a plan, carefully orchestrated, patiently executed, and designed to leave one person out of the picture, permanently. The deeper they searched, the more tangled it became. They uncovered financial records showing that Mark had been sending money to Alyssa, even after their divorce. Small amounts at first, then thousands. Transfers labeled things like emergency settlement, and for him. Detectives asked Alyssa what the payments were for. She claimed she had no idea, that Mark was obsessed, that he kept trying to control her life. But phone data showed otherwise. Just days before Daniel's murder, Alyssa and Mark had met at a motel just outside town. No cameras in the rooms, but the lobby captured them, checking in, together, under fake names. They stayed for nearly 4 hours. When questioned, Alyssa denied it, claimed it was someone who looked like her, said detectives were confused, but the front desk clerk confirmed it was her, and the signature on the check-in form matched hers exactly. Then came the break investigators had been waiting for. A search warrant for Mark S. home turned up a hidden laptop, buried in a locked toolbox in the garage. On it was a folder titled Exit Plan. Inside were documents, fake IDs, financial plans, even a forged passport with Alyssa's old name. There was also a typed document, a letter, labeled If Anything Happens. It began with, "To whom it may concern." This was never supposed to happen this way, but the letter was unsigned. And even more chilling, it ended with the final line, "I warned her." But she chose him. Investigators were now certain. This wasn't a story about love. This was a story about possession, about power. Mark had watched the woman he once called his wife fall in love with his best friend. And he didn't take it as heartbreak. He took it as betrayal. But was he the mastermind, or just a pawn in something even darker? Because as damning as the evidence looked against Mark, there was still one piece missing, the murder weapon. It was never found, not at Daniel's house, not in Mark's car, not in the woods behind the motel. And that led investigators to one haunting question. If Mark didn't dispose of it, who did? Someone was still hiding something, and the web was far from finished unraveling. 43 days after Daniel Cross was murdered, detectives made their first arrest. It wasn't Alyssa, it was Mark Reeves. He was pulled over just outside state lines, heading west on a 2-lane highway in a rental car he hadn't told anyone about. In the trunk were camping supplies, burner phones, and just over $8,000 in cash. To investigators, it looked like a man running. But when Mark was brought in, he didn't flinch. He denied everything. The burner phone? Never seen it. The motel footage? Not him. The emails? Forged. He sat calmly across the interrogation table, expressionless, arms folded, and said, "You're wasting your time. I didn't kill Daniel." And maybe he was telling the truth. Because when detectives told Alyssa about Mark's arrest, her reaction wasn't relief. It was panic. She asked one question. "Did he say anything about me?" Then she started crying. 3 hours later, she returned to the station with a lawyer. And that's when everything changed. In a signed statement, Alyssa admitted she had seen Mark the day before Daniel's death. She claimed he showed up unexpectedly, that he was angry, unstable. She said he threatened to ruin everything if she went through with the wedding. But she stopped short of saying he killed Daniel. Instead, she claimed Mark told her he was going to take care of it, and that she didn't believe him, until it was too late. Detectives weren't satisfied. Neither was the prosecutor. Then came the audio. Stored on Mark's hidden laptop, buried inside an encrypted folder, was a voice recording. A conversation dated 6 days before the murder. Alyssa's voice, tense and shaking, can be heard saying, "You said this would be clean. No blood. You promised." Mark replies, "And it will be. But you need to be ready. You can't fall apart now, not after everything we've done." It was the closest thing to a confession either of them had made, and it was enough. Mark Reeves was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and obstruction of justice. But Alyssa was charged too. Prosecutors argued that while Mark may have delivered the fatal blow, Alyssa had set it all in motion. 2 arrests, 1 dead man, and a love story that turned into a cold, calculated plot. Still, one question haunted everyone involved. If they planned it together, who betrayed who first? The trial began 11 months after Daniel Cross was murdered. By then, the media had caught wind of the story, and it spread like wildfire. Headlines called it the engagement murder. Lovers turned killers. The fiancé, the best friend, and the dead man. Inside the courtroom, Daniel's family sat silently. His mother held a photo of him in her lap every day. His younger sister said she couldn't look at Alyssa without trembling. The prosecution argued that Mark and Alyssa planned the murder to eliminate Daniel and restart their life together, using his death as a clean slate. They showed text messages, burner phone logs, voice recordings, and the financial trail. They painted a picture of cold calculation, and deep, layered betrayal. The defense, on the other hand, tried to separate the two. Mark's lawyer claimed Alyssa manipulated him. Alyssa's lawyer claimed she was terrified and trapped, a victim of psychological abuse. The jury didn't buy it. Mark Reeves was found guilty on all counts. Life in prison without parole. Elisa Monroe, or Elisa Reeves, was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and accessory after the fact. She was sentenced to 22 years in prison. No one clapped, no one cheered. Outside the courthouse, Daniel's sisters spoke through tears. They didn't just take his life. They made a fool of his love. Daniel's death shattered more than one life. His co-workers said the office never felt the same again. His friends struggled to process how someone so loyal could be betrayed so completely, and his parents never returned to the house he grew up in. They moved out of state less than a month after the trial ended. As for Mark and Alyssa, they haven't spoken since their sentencing. Each one blames the other. But one thing is clear. Together they built a lie so convincing it nearly got away with murder. After the trial ended and the courtroom lights dimmed, one final discovery changed everything. 6 weeks after Alyssa was sentenced, a sealed envelope arrived at the prosecutor's office. No return address, no fingerprints. Inside was a USB drive. On it, a video file, barely 90 seconds long. The footage shows a hotel room, Mark, Alyssa, and Daniel. It was dated 4 months before the murder. All three of them, together, laughing, drinking, comfortable. At one point, Daniel looks directly into the camera and says, "If this ever comes back to bite us, I want you to know I didn't agree to that part." Then the screen goes dark. Investigators were stunned. Why was Daniel in that room? What did he mean by that part? And who recorded the video? To this day, the source of the footage remains unknown. The sender never came forward, and the contents were never used in court. But it raised a disturbing possibility that Daniel knew more than anyone realized, and that, perhaps, his death wasn't just about love, it was about silence. In the end, the case was closed. But the truth? Maybe it still lives in the shadows, with someone who's never spoken and never been caught. Thank you for walking through this dark and painful journey with us. At Crime Vault, we're committed to telling the stories that others bury, stories of real people, real crimes, real consequences. If this case moved you, if it made you question what love, loyalty, or betrayal really look like, then please subscribe to Crime Vault. It's free, and it has one powerful way you can help us keep telling the truth, no matter how disturbing it is. Your support means more than you know, and your voice helps us keep theirs alive. Until next time, stay aware, stay safe, and never assume the person smiling beside you has nothing to hide.